Coming up on Wrestling Life.
I really don't know where it came from. I just went out there and I've been wrestling for 8 years. I was called Mr. Wrestling. I could do an hour time limit draw and not use the same hold twice. The wrestling was easy. A lot of the new guys, that's the hard part. This is the easy part. So then I could just be having fun and doing character stuff. And I don't know where not the inspiration, but just what came out of me. I don't know where it came from, but I just did it.
This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that celebrates wrestling's past, present, and future with real talk from real talent.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Wrestling Life conversation. Joining me today is a great guest who I know is going to have so many tremendous stories to share. With a professional wrestling career that spanned 25 years and included a record 8 reigns as OVW Heavyweight Champion and 11 OVW Southern Tag Team title wins, Nick Dinsmore has had an exceptional career inside the ropes. But he's most widely recognised by wrestling fans not by his real name, but rather by the Eugene character that he so famously brought to life inside the WWE ring. It's been more than 20 years now since audiences were first introduced to Eugene, but the character remains one of wrestling's most fascinating gimmicks, delighting some fans and dividing others. Today we're going to be talking about all things Eugene and hearing about how that character changed the course of my guest's life. Welcome to Wrestling Life. It is, of course, the one, the only, it's Mr. Nick Dinsmore. Nick, show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I'm so pleased we can do this. I mean, it's recording this in early 2025, and it's been a few years now since you made the decision to walk away and have your retirement tour. What is life like for you these days, Nick? And what's your relationship like with the pro wrestling business?
Well, I'm still on retirement tour. I didn't say I was retiring. I said I'm on retirement tour. Handsome Jimmy Valiant was on retirement tour for 15 years. Kiss and Motley Crue been on retirement tour for 20 years. So I'm just going to keep going until I have my last match.
I love that. You're still rolling. There's no such thing as a retirement in wrestling anyway, is there?
Nope.
So yeah, how I know you've been making some great strides on YouTube with your channel Eugene Behind the Scenes. How's that journey been for you so far?
Well, I'm want to document the things that I've done and give my opinions on them. I want to write a book, but I'm also using that as step by step to talk about certain things on Eugene Behind the Scene, the YouTube channel. I just some answer some questions here and there, talking about certain things, but trying to chronicle my career.
Is it a nice way to kind of still feel connected to the business?
Well, I really want to write a book, and I've been saying I'm going to do it, so I'm writing. I'll watch a Raw that I was on. I'll write whatever I can remember about it. And then I might use it on video. I might just keep it filed away, put it in the book or not. I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess it all kind of, you're involved in so many matches and had so many moments during your career, but I guess it's really important to chronicle that because I'm sure a lot of it blends into one another unless you really go back and look back at those big moments.
Well, I mean, I was in the ring with The Rock. I was in the ring with Hulk Hogan. I even pinned Vince McMahon, won the tag team titles. I mean, I did a thing or two.
You did do a thing or two. And I said to you off air, but, the main talking point today, is going to be Eugene. I mean, that character really delighted some of the fan base. It divided others. I was in my early 20s, at the time that I saw the character, and I saw it one way, but now kind of 20 years on, I'm a dad to an autistic son. So I see that character very, very differently. And I've been on this kind of real journey of discovery around neurodiversity. And in my work, I do a lot around championing neurodiversity and inclusion. I think one thing there's not anywhere near enough of in media is representation of autistic people. And so kind of firstly, I want to say thank you for presenting the Eugene character in the way that you did, because I think the very fact we're still talking about it today shows just what an impact you had with your portrayal of that character. I would be fascinated. I heard you talk about this before, but I'd be fascinated if you can kind of take my audience back to the very beginning of Eugene's development and how that idea first came about for you.
So I started wrestling in 1996. I got hired developmental by WWE in 1999. I did some WCW in 1998. I did some USWA in 1997. But I was hired by WWE in 1999. I had a couple years of experience. So when they sent, I was already in Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky area was my hometown. I was wrestling for OVW. So when they started bringing the talent like John Cena, Batista, and Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Victoria, Shelton Benjamin, on and on and on, I had a little bit more experience. So I wasn't the main coach, but I was a player coach wrestling them. And I just kept doing that. And I was, I felt like my craft was getting better, but it got to be about 2003. And then like all my friends have been called up. Conway, Rob Conway, Doug Basham, Danny Basham. And I'd seen a lot of guys. Hold on, let me back up. So one of my trainers, Rip Rogers, his son has autism. And Rip was just trying to always give me ideas for some kind of character. And he said, what about a character that might not be able to tie his shoes, might not be able to put the square peg in the square hole, but the minute, he gets in the wrestling ring, he can do everything flawlessly because he's watched it his whole life. And there was another layer to the Eugene onion, is that Eugene would know all the trivia. Some random show in the middle of somewhere, he would know the gate and how many people and who's on top. And I said that a couple times in some interviews, but I'd always have to go to Howard Finkel because Howard Finkel really knew everything.
Okay.
But Rip gave me this idea, so I just kind of put it in the back of my head. And this was probably early 2003. A couple months later, the agents would come down. I remember it was Arn Anderson. And I pitched that idea to Arn. I remember Arn goes, we're more reality-based now. We don't really do gimmicks like that anymore. Okay. So I just shelved the idea. Another couple months go by. The writers came down. And the writers didn't come down often. So I pitched it to them, and that's when they said, oh, Vince would never do a character like that. No. Okay. I'd seen a lot of people come to Louisville and then complain and then get called up to the main roster. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. I tell my students that all the time. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I told Doug Basham, I said, I think I'm going to quit and try to go to Japan. I didn't know anybody in Japan. I had no idea how to get there. It was a bluff. I was living at home in my own hometown. I was a top babyface or top heel on a television show in my hometown. Most of the shows were no more than 2 hours away. I mean, I was wrestling for a living, so it was pretty cool. But I tell Doug Basham, I think I'm going to quit and try to go to Japan. Doug tells Dean Malenko. Dean tells Johnny Ace. February 2004, I found myself at a Raw. I made a meeting with Vince McMahon, and Stephanie McMahon's in the room. And Vince goes, I want to get back to character-based wrestling. And I just spit this out. What about a character, might not be very social, but he's an idiot savant that when he gets in the ring and the bell rings, he's watched it his whole life and he does it flawlessly. So Vince was kind of pondering over the Rain Man of wrestling, huh? Stone Cold Steve Austin had come back to do, I think he was promoting one of his movies on a Saturday Night's Main Event taping. He walks in Vince's office. Vince goes, Steve, have you ever seen this guy wrestle? And Steve kind of looked at me. You know how Austin looks at people like that little eye? He goes, no, I don't think I have. I said, well, Nightmare Danny Davis trained me. Because Nightmare Danny Davis was my first trainer, and then Rip Rogers was the guy I wrestled with in the ring a lot. But I said, no, Nightmare Danny Davis trained me. And Austin goes, well, you're probably one of the best. And Vince goes, all right, great, we'll start on Monday. We didn't actually start the very next Monday, but I think it was April when Eugene debuted.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Just like that.
Well, I pitched the idea of the character, and I had all the gear I had said Nick Dinsmore. So I had to borrow a pair of trunks from Rob Conway that he used to give the seamstress so she knew what the pattern was for his trunk. So that was the bluish purple trunks I had. The jacket was a buddy got it at a flea market for $6, and it just looked like the old 80s babyface jackets. I had knee pads and my boots, and I went to a Raw one time and dressed up in an outfit, and all right, but they said, we want you to do a live event before we debut on TV. Because I don't know if they knew like what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was St. Louis. It was during the time of the Final Four, and we had a live event, and it was an afternoon show, like a 3 o'clock or a noon show, 1 o'clock show. And I wrestled Lance Cade. And I was so fortunate to be able to wrestle Lance because Lance knew how to wrestle with a gimmick. And most of the time, if a guy goes out to a WWE live event and he hasn't been on WWE TV, the fans will not they won't respond to him, or they'll boo him, but they won't cheer him. At the end of this match, I hadn't been on TV, but the crowd was chanting Eugene's name, and I got beat.
Wow.
I came back through the curtain, and Triple H was there, Stephanie was there, Arn was there, Fit was there, all standing ovation. And Triple H goes, you embrace the character, because I really don't know where it came from. I just went out there and I've been wrestling for 8 years. I was called Mr. Wrestling. I could do an hour time limit draw and not use the same hold twice. The wrestling was easy. A lot of the new guys, that's the hard part. This is the easy part. So then I could just be having fun and doing character stuff. And I don't know where not the inspiration, but just what came out of me. I don't know where it came from, but I just did it. I came back to the curtain, and they're all like, you embrace the character. It was awesome. And then I started on TV after that, and they would slowly give me a little bit. And I don't think that they thought the character would succeed like it did. I think they were. I think I squeaked my squeaky oil, my squeaky wheel, and they said, okay, let's give him a shot. And if it doesn't work, we'll just fire him. Because that's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously this was a time, in talking about OVW, this was a time when they were bringing up lots of talent as their real names. So John Cena, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin, Dave Bautista, they were all kind of coming into the business. So they were losing characters. Why do you think we didn't see Mr. Wrestling, Nick Dinsmore, making?
So JR told me one time, he goes, you're a great wrestler. And I think all the writers, all the agents knew that. He goes, but you got like the D. Malenko syndrome. You got no facials. It's just wrestling. So that's when I just turned it completely the other way. And I tried to do the biggest facials I could do, over pantomime everything, and just be bigger. And instead of wrestling, I started doing comedy in my matches at OVW just to entertain myself. And everybody would laugh in the locker room, everybody would laugh in class, because I was so used to the wrestling was no longer difficult. And then I could just do character. But it was the writer Brian Gewirtz that wrote everything for Eugene. And I think he wrote most of the Rock stuff when the Rock was there too. But I was fortunate because Brian knew how to write for Eugene. That's a character that he goes, okay, I know what to do, and he wrote all of it, and it was great. They brought Eugene in as Eric Bischoff's nephew, which gave me instant credibility. William Regal had just come back from an injury. They put me with him, so then we could have the odd couple, and he was so good. I think without Regal, Eugene would not have succeeded the way he did, because all the wrestling fans know that Regal was the no good scoundrel for 20 years. And then all of a sudden his character evolved to care for somebody. And it was like, I watched it back and it's like, it was such good television.
Yeah.
But when they brought Eugene in first, they said, the only thing that was said was Eugene is special. That's what Eric Bischoff said. My nephew's a little special. And we let the fans draw their own conclusion to what that meant. And in my head, I thought about like the way I would feel when I was a kid if I got excited, if I got scared, if I got nervous, if I got bashful, and I would just try to bring back that naive like innocent emotion that you have about anything.
Yeah.
And just try to emote that, and then use the comedy, because this was a point when it was after the NWO, after Stone Cold Steve Austin, but everybody still wanted to be a cool, strong heel that got all their moves in and didn't sell. And I knew that I wanted to be the complete opposite. I wanted to be a sympathetic babyface that got beat up and did comedy. Because Hurricane and Rosie were the only kids characters on the show, but the brands were split. So I knew that one brand didn't have that demographic being fulfilled.
Yeah, that's interesting. You came in at a time, 2004, being a very strange period for WWE, that kind of ruthless aggression era where a lot of the big names had left. The Rock was kind of skirted in and out of the business. It was kind of the Attitude Era talent had all pretty much tailed off, bar The Undertaker and a couple of others. And you're right, it had become a very characterless environment at the time, hadn't it, really? And so when Eugene comes in, it is a real breath of fresh air, but it's also, of an era where, obviously it was never overtly said, I don't believe, that the character was autistic. I think it was all, am I right in saying that Eugene was always talked about being special, and there was just always that ambiguity around the character?
So the only time we ever put a label on Eugene was when Linda McMahon was running for Senate. I wasn't even employed, but they asked me to come do a stand-up for WWE because Linda's opposition was saying that Vince poured paint and stuck a Down syndrome kid's head in the toilet. And I went on to say, that's where I think I don't, because I think they took it off the internet, but I basically say, Eugene was a character that had, disabilities, but he achieved. He was an underdog. He met his goals. He fulfilled his dream. He lived his dream. Became a champion. Trying to tell Linda's political opposition that they didn't do anything bad to a character. Like that's how they were painting it. But
yeah,
when I was on TV. They never said. I mean, I think Regal called me a window licker one time, but they just said Eugene was special.
I think there's a lot of, if you take clips out of context, then absolutely. But any one of us who watched the product through that time knows that actually Eugene had more than his incredible moments. And as you say, I mean, you weren't presented as a small character from the off. You're brought in as Eric Bischoff's nephew, which is a really big deal. I mean, how did Eric feel about that character, and what was it like working with Eric?
So I feel like Vince probably did that to put another knock on Eric and WCW, and just we'll make special Eugene his nephew, but it put me right in the mix with all the top guys, and Eric was great to work with. Like I said, I'd done some WCW. I'd shaken his hand, but I really never met him, didn't really know him. And he was willing to work, and he wanted to work, and he was there strictly as a talent, and he was very good. Maybe 5 years ago, on his 83 Weeks podcast, I think it was that one. He has a supplemental, like a Patreon podcast, but I think on the 83 Weeks, he said he was I don't know if he said he regretted or was ashamed that he was a part of the Eugene angle. Mm. But then he called me right afterwards and said, hey, will you come on? I went on the Patreon and said, well, we can talk about it. And I said, okay. Now, I was in Pigeon Forge, autograph signing. Boy comes up. Boy, he was 20 years old, 21. Got the picture with Eugene, got the 8x10 sign, and then he handed me his phone. And it was a message from his mother to me, basically saying that he'd always been the weird kid, didn't have the dad. She's working 2 jobs, trying to go to school. He's the oldest of 3 kids. And when he was having a lot of difficulty in school is when Eugene came on, and it gave him a lot of hope, and she could show a positive male role model and someone that he identified with. So it was really, so when I went on Bischoff's Patreon podcast, I sent him that letter and said, you've got to read it because I can't do it. Yeah. He started crying.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I think he's like, Eugene made a difference.
And that's been really clear. I mean, watching some of your YouTube videos recently, I mean, you've had a lot of people contact you, haven't you, to say that, they really related to the character, that they're autistic, and actually it was great to have someone represented them on wrestling. I know that obviously the character has also received its fair amount of criticism over the years, and there's an element of obviously hindsight there. We're living in a very different world to 2004. We know a lot more about the language to use and representation now than perhaps we did back then. But I think that the character, the way it was presented, it in many ways was very strong. I mean, you go from, as you say, Eric Bischoff's nephew, and before long, one of your big matches in 2004 was you faced Triple H at SummerSlam, which is absolutely huge. So, that's they've really thrust you into the main event there very, very quickly. And that's a real nod from Hunter that he's going to work that program with you. I think it was Eugene's 5th week on TV is when I was in the ring with The Rock. It's incredible.
So, I mean, I went from a character that I don't know that they were really thinking would take off, and it took off. I mean, signs were all over the place. It was a magical time for me.
It's just one of those organic things, isn't it? But when it's working, you just ride that wave because actually the fans are responding to it. So go with it and see where it takes you. And obviously they know, they being kind of the WWE office, they know what you can do within the ring. So there's no reservations about putting you in there against these main event workers because they know you'll be able to deliver when the bell rings. I want to circle back a little bit to the chemistry you had with William Regal, which really stands out to me in some of my great memories from that time. I mean, I've had a lot of kind of British talent on the show who have learnt a lot from William Regal, especially around his kind of facial expressions and how obviously growing, doing the rounds of the kind of independence in the UK in the 80s and early 90s, how important it was for William Regal to resonate with people with these facial expressions at the back and the front of the auditorium. What was it like to be paired up with such a veteran performer, but someone who also has, remarkable comic timing as well as being great in the ring?
When I first started wrestling, the Hustler Rip Rogers, he was in Germany with William Regal. And it was actually Rip that told Regal what to write Bill Watts that got him to WCW.
Right, okay.
So Rip would always put him over, and so it was so good. And I'd watch him on WCW, and I was a fan of him. I was a fan of all the wrestlers. And I mean, he's one of my favorites. And then I'd met him going up and doing dark matches and stuff, shaking his hand. He knew I was one of Rip's guys. So, but then when I got paired with him, I mean, and it was like our chemistry was it just took off. And it's like, I can't explain it. It's like, I haven't had that kind of chemistry with anybody. I've had certain types of chemistry with certain opponents or partners, but this one was just like off the charts.
Yeah, there was you and William Regal's pairing with you, and also Regal's pairing with Tajiri, both of which were tremendous odd couple pairings. It just worked. Just shows his kind of versatility as a performer.
He's incredible. He should be in the Hall of Fame. I think he should. I mean, he might have should have had a world title run. I don't know, but he was a very good time and great wrestler. And I would ride with him, so I get to pick his brain and talk. And Tajiri was in the car with us too, and Tajiri would never say a word.
So I want to go back to that match at SummerSlam then. So SummerSlam 2004, you face Triple H, obviously a huge match for your career. What can you tell me about that kind of feud, the build up to it, and working that match with Hunter?
I mean, it was incredible. I've watched some of those matches back. I mean, Eugene was on fire, and they were smart enough. Like, they put me out there, but like it was the match was Benoit and Hunter, and Eugene comes at the end, and the place just explodes. And I'm in there just a short period of time. I mean, it was just just like a skyrocket. It was the craziest thing. I mean, every week something was better and more and funny.
Crazy. And then you have the Taboo Tuesday shows, which I loved. I thought that was such a great concept, very, very ahead of its time. The first one, 2004, you have the privilege of shaving your uncle Eric bald. What can you tell me about that night?
So, for some reason, I didn't get the good clippers.
Okay.
I got like the beard trimmers, and Eric's got thick hair. And I'm trying to get it, and the Vince said, use the scissors. And I'm like trying to not, cut him, but whatever. Because when I had to return the favor and I shaved my head for Vince in the Battle of the Billionaires with Donald Trump, Vince got the good clippers, and it just took my hair straight off.
Right. Yeah, that was often a thing, wasn't it? With those shave your head matches, there's also this really awkward bit at the end where they just tried to like hack away at hair at the end. It's
like a beard trimmer that they didn't go. Somebody's got thick hair, it doesn't work, and you're a little bit sweaty or something. Like horrible.
You talked about earlier on that the tag team championship run. You had that with William Regal, but it was cut short due to you getting injured. Do you know what the plans were for you both? If you hadn't been sidelined, would it have ended up being a feud, which seems to be the inevitable conclusion to most odd couple tag team partners?
So I think it was when Bischoff was going to have his head shaved, he went in and talked them into having Regal turn on me that night and shave my head. And they almost did it. But Regal knew he and I had much more distance to go together. So he went in and like kind of got it changed, but because Bischoff was the one that wanted to do the shave his head. It's not like they asked him. He went to him, I'll shave my head.
Right.
But
a moment that kind of has really lived on, WrestleMania 21, which is one of my favorite WrestleManias. You had a huge moment that night. You were involved in the segments of Muhammad Hassan, Daivari, and then you end up getting the whole thing gets interrupted by Hulk Hogan. How was it to share the ring with the Hulkster and be part of such an iconic moment on such a huge show?
I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to have my WrestleMania moment with Hulk. I never thought it would have happened, but that's how it came down. That was the magic of Eugene.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I had Mark Kapani, aka Mohammed Hassan, on the show recently. You know, he followed a similar journey to you with, you know, OVW and the call up. You know, he was really candid about his character and the shelf life that it had because of the kind of nuclear levels of heat he was getting. But also, he felt very, very proud that he was able to represent an unrepresented minority through the character he was playing. It feels like there's quite a lot of similarities between Mohammed Hassan and Eugene at the time.
Yeah, you were talking about there have been some critics when Eugene debuted on TV. No one has ever said to me, to my face. They say it on social media sometimes, but never said to my face, "You did something wrong," or "the character was a disgrace." You know, nobody ever said. And then when I first debuted on TV, there were some media outlets that were like, "What's WWE doing now?" Because we really weren't sure. There was like 3 weeks before Eugene had his first match, but then when they saw Eugene win, they realized it was the underdog story, and I never heard any media outlet, and all of a sudden it was everybody loved Eugene. It's only been more recently that people look back and say, "Oh, you did something bad. That's a disgrace. I think it's horrible." But I find that I've gotten way much more positive affirmation for people that have family members that are autistic or special or have special needs, because I've heard it over and over. My little brother has autism, and when he saw you, he said, "I can do anything because Eugene did." And
Yeah. And that's the reality. It's the reason, you know, I wanted to get in touch with you, because it's all very well to kind of look at Eugene and the character and the wave and all that kind of stuff. But actually the bit that's overlooked is the fact that as soon as the bell rang, you know, he hit every move flawlessly. He could do every single finishing move perfectly. He knew everything about wrestling. He was incredible in the ring. And that is you know, again, it's always very challenging with autism, because people can talk about autism being a superpower, which for people that live with autism can be quite a frustrating thing to hear. And obviously the Rain Man hasn't always been a particularly helpful kind of representation, because again, it kind of creates that ability, that belief that kind of someone who's autistic is potentially incredibly gifted in one area and that overpowers all things. But certainly my experience with living with my son and what I've learned about myself through neurodiversity is autistic people generally are very, very good at hyper focusing on one thing and doing that one thing very well, because it's their passion, it's their love, and it's the thing that they think about all the time. So it works perfectly. Your depiction of it and how, you know, Eugene just had this encyclopedic knowledge of the industry is spot on. I think it's very easy, as say, you're getting feedback over the last couple of years, some critical feedback, but it's very easy again to kind of take things out of context. And, you know, this was the time, you know, you're coming in at the same time as the Divas search. Now, no one talks about the Divas search being really disrespectful to women, but essentially you were bringing in lots of models for a paycheck to get a WWE contract. That wouldn't happen now either. So, you know, 2004 is very, very different to 2025.
Well, it's one thing I've always said, that WWE has always had the ability to do whatever they want and make it right. You know what I mean? Yeah. They've got such good creative team that they can put some spin on it to be, "Oh, okay, now I understand. I accept it now." Like they took the mask off Kane, you know, and then they put it back on, and it was just they have the ability, if they really want to, make something work to make it right.
Yeah, they gave him his hair back.
Yeah.
So another match I've got to ask you about. So I loved the match that you had with Kurt Angle. You know, I've had Kurt on the show before, and you know, I love that match where you win his Olympic gold medal. I mean, what? And again, you shared the ring with Hunter the previous year. Like, what was it like to work with one of the greatest of all time in that feud?
I had my first WWE match with Kurt Angle before he was on TV. We had a dark match in like, I can't, 98, 90, I can't remember when it was, but I just come off that knee surgery. So I shouldn't have been cleared to wrestle, because I couldn't run, I couldn't pivot. I mean, and I kind of got forced back a little quickly. I went back quickly. I don't know if I got forced back, but he's such a great athlete, and you know, I had good timing, but I was about a step behind.
Yeah, I mean, he's just something else, isn't he, Kurt? Really, I mean, he's just, you know, there's few talents like that you just see that take to it so immediately, and yeah, once in a generation kind of talent. And then you kind of have this period where you moved on. So we're going back to Taboo Tuesday again. This is a year later after the head shave, and this time you start to kind of align yourself with some of these WWE legends. So the fan vote for that one was you teaming up with Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Personally, I would have loved to have seen you in a ring with Kamala, because I was a Kamala guy through and through as a kid. But I'm guessing that was a pretty surreal experience to share a ring with the Superfly.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, and that the fans voted on it, and that's to see like Jimmy was a huge star in the 80s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, and he still had that power. And people, he won like a tremendous amount of the votes. But the funny thing is I gave him a ride to the airport because he had a red eye out of I think we were in San Diego. And he acted like he'd never heard of a GPS before, because the things give me directions. Brother, what's that? What's that say, brother? Good gimmick. But he was really nice, and he always remembered me after that. So it was cool.
Yeah, I love that. And he's that link to that kind of, I that kind of pre-WrestleMania era of wrestling, isn't it? So I think that was why, that there's so much love for that era. But the time before wrestling really exploded, when it was still the territories and before WWF became the colossal behemoth that it did.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I'd have still loved to have seen a tag team with you and Kamala. That would have got my vote any day of the week. So I wanted to ask about your kind of suspension from WWE in late 2005, because that came just a couple of weeks, obviously, after the untimely death of Eddie Guerrero, which must have been so hard for so many of you in the locker room. I know how loved Eddie was. Obviously, you've been riding a real wave of momentum as Eugene, and then obviously you get suspended for a couple of months. How did that impact you and kind of affect your career in WWE from that point?
That put the brakes on Eugene being a top guy. You know what I mean? After I was in the ring with The Rock, I mean, if I was in the Mafia, I would have been a made man. I was a top guy. Yeah. But when I got suspended, then I got shelved a little bit and just had to sit and wait.
Yeah, because I guess it's a trust thing, isn't it? And it's if they're banking all of their kind of creative plans on you, and then something like that happens, it's going to, I guess, sow those seeds of doubt for a little bit in terms of where you're going next and where they want to build you in. Yeah. But it continues, and you jump from Jimmy Snuka to this pairing with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, which felt like it could have had a lot more mileage. Like, it felt like it could have been a long-term deal, especially as this was kind of around the time that you had Ric Flair and Roddy Piper having their one last run as tag champions. So there was obviously this real wave of nostalgia. Was there any consideration? I know you two had a shot at the tag titles. Was there any consideration to actually going the full distance with Eugene and Duggan and having you as champs and having a run with it?
I had no idea. I was there listening and doing what I was told. But Hacksaw was he was kind of hoping that we would win the tag titles, because he'd never held a title in WWE.
Of course, yeah.
And then he was hoping that we could have a match at WrestleMania, because then he would have had the most time between his last appearance at Mania and then that appearance.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen, because very quickly you turn heel on him, which seemed to come out of the blue, and then that heel run is really quickly dropped. What was behind that heel turn, which seems like a strange one for Eugene?
I just think that they wanted to try something different and see if we could change the character and make it a heel and see what kind of heat we could get with it. I like Hacksaw, but if I would have turned on Shawn Michaels, I would have got some more heat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it might have been my inability as a performer to get across whatever Eugene as a heel should have been, but it felt like the people just were like, "Why is Eugene being mean?" It was like, I don't know. It was like too happy of a character.
It feels uncomfortable for the character to be that character, or for that character to not be eliciting a good response. Just doesn't feel right, really. So then, we met 2007. You kind of evolved the character to this superhero presentation, the superhero Eugene gimmick. So what was behind that? You had a very kind of classic look before, as you say, your flea market jacket, very synonymous with the Eugene character. Where does that kind of superhero look come from?
Well, it took me a while to learn this, and if I would have learned it earlier, I probably could have made some more money. But if you keep changing your gear about every 6 weeks, they make a new action figure to represent the gear you have. Jeff Hardy would change his gear every 6 weeks, and he gets a new action figure. I had the jacket and the trunks for the longest time, so I wanted something different, and I just had that made just because I felt like it was kind of childish or playful or something.
Yeah. Were you feeling at that point, like, so we're kind of talking 2007, were you feeling like there was still a lot more left to the Eugene character creatively, or were you starting to feel like it was big? Because obviously the momentum's not quite there from the early days when you were riding such a high. Did you feel like there was still a lot more that you could do with the character at that point?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, if WWE wants to put the pencil behind it and wants to turn it, they can push somebody just like that. They could still do it today. They could bring Eugene back on Monday Night Raw and on Netflix, and just it could be the biggest thing ever.
They could. Just throwing it out there. I like it. And also, I think, for the underdog story, for Eugene to have actually become a champion would have actually really worked. Even if it was just a brief run with the Intercontinental US title, but to have actually had a chance to win.
It had been the world title. It had been the world title.
Yeah, he's going for the top.
Had to. Yeah. I mean, with the trajectory Eugene was on, there's no other place to go.
Yeah. So where does the idea come about to kind of emulate all of the finishing moves, which obviously you performed so well? Who do you pitch that in, or is that something they know you can do from your OVW days?
We used to do it in training. Doug Basham and I would do it, and Rip would get mad. He'd go, "You're never going to do that up there, so why are you doing it down here?" Yeah. But I think when I did the thing in the ring with The Rock, later on I had a match, and then someone had said to do the people's elbow, rock bottom people's elbow. I don't remember if it was Michael P.S. Hayes or Hunter or someone, and then it just kind of became a thing. I just did all the moves that were over, and people got with it.
Yeah, your stunner was excellent. So, when you were released by WWE in September 2007, how did that come out of the blue for you? Did you see that coming?
No, I mean, when I got suspended earlier, I failed the wellness policy. Well, there was no wellness policy when I got suspended earlier. I kind of might have been the cause of the wellness policy or had influence on it. And then you're supposed to have 3 strikes and you're out. And then I had 1 strike and I was out.
Was there ever any talk about Nick Dinsmore having a run after Eugene, to allow enough time for the Eugene character to, I guess, move away from people's memories? Or do you think that character was so iconic that it would have been really hard for you to have ever brought back another gimmick?
I could have, but do you remember when Hurricane went back to just being Shane Helms? Mm-hmm. It wasn't as marketable. It wasn't as fun. People didn't, I could have, but Eugene is much more marketable.
Yeah, I feel like the only way to do it would have been to like renounce everything about Eugene and say that it was all an act, and to kind of go back on the character, because no one would be very, very hard for anyone to believe you as something else other than that character, because this is the same as the conversation I had with Mark Kapani about Muhammad Hassan. Once you make a character that iconic, unfortunately, there's nowhere really to go for you, is there? After that, because everyone knows you for one character. It's like being typecast for one gimmick.
Very much so.
Yeah. So what was life like for you after WWE then, as you kind of traveled the independents and also returned to OVW?
Man, I became almost more busy after than when I was with WWE. I started going everywhere. I didn't realize how much independent wrestling was around the world. And I was just, I'm still wrestling. I was just in the UK and Europe for 2 months, and then I'm going to Canada for 12 days tomorrow. So I'm still.
And do you still enjoy it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go out there and put on baby oil and roll around with other men and my spandex. Yeah, it's great.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
So I know you brought back a few times by WWE between 2009, 2014, and you worked as well as a trainer for NXT. That was at a time when, NXT, the roster was absolutely bursting at the seams with, all of these future WWE main eventers that will headline WrestleMania now. What was that time like training at NXT and being on the other side of the ropes?
Well, I'd started being, like I said, an assistant coach about 3 years in, about 1998, 1999. So it's something that I had done, and people seem to be able to, I seem to be able to tell people what we're doing and get the best out of them. And relay it in a way they can understand. And back then too, I could still get in the ring a little bit. I'm not gonna still get in the ring now, but I would get in the ring with a little bit more so they could really feel it. But I got hired when it was FCW, right as it crossed over to NXT at the Performance Center. And that Performance Center, like if people go there and don't make it, it's got to be their fault because they've got all the video, they've got all the people with all the experience that they can go to. I mean, I think Hunter went to the New York Giants training center. American football, the NFL New York Giants, and saw their training center and goes, okay, I'm going to build something like this. And it's like this huge complex with a huge gym and rings and the little shadow boxes or whatever, the confessional boxes, and they can cut promos and then they can go back and watch them. I mean, it's really cool.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, did you, when you did some time in WCW, I know you were kind of doing stuff in WCW 98, 99. Did you ever experience the power plant?
No, I was around some of the guys that were power plant guys, but I never went there.
No, it's just, it seems like it's like the power plant laid the seeds and then the performance center is just that huge jump forward, isn't it? In terms of everything you could possibly need to become a star, but also to become a star in the WWE mold and way of doing things on their TV.
Well, that's like WWE has a quality of excellence on everything they do. You know what I mean? The production, their house shows, the TVs. And when Hunter was transitioning from in-ring to office, Vince goes, I want you to go around to every department, the finance, the marketing, the toys, whatever, do a report, go for a couple weeks and give me a report back. So when he comes back, he goes, well, everything's great, except that developmentals look really weird. So then Vince goes, okay, then that's yours.
Okay.
Because, I mean, at the time, OVW, DCW, FCW were independent wrestling companies that contracted with WWE to train their talent. And I think Hunter kind of opened his eyes and goes, then why aren't we training them?
So at the time that you were working in FCW and, as it becomes NXT, who were some of the talents that you worked with and helped to train?
I started in the NXT at the Performance Center, but I was hired when it was still FCW. But Chad Gable was in my class. Braun Strowman was in my class. All the girls that came out of there, Charlotte, Sasha, they weren't in my class, but I would have open classes and they would come. Sasha Banks, Bailey. I mean, it was a really good time. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I mean, it was just there was a time much like OVW in the early 2000s, the kind of class of 2002 that everyone talks about. That kind of crop of NXT between 2013 and 2016 has essentially been the next generation of, as I said, all the headliners. Every big star you can think of in WWE today has pretty much come out of that time. You mentioned the UK. Obviously, I'm recording from the UK. A lot of my audience is here. I wanted to ask you about a match that you had in 2015 because you mixed it up with Grado, and very few stars elicit responses over here like Grado does. He just has you talk about the organic connection of Eugene. I mean, it doesn't really come any more organic than that connection Grado has. Were you familiar with Grado's work before you two worked together?
Yeah, I met him in Scotland in 2012, I think. I did a show there and we were partners and we did a couple of shows together. So we always kept in touch. And then when I got released as a coach and I started doing more independent dates, I don't know if it was a promo, a video, or if it was just a tweet or something. I said I wanted to have 4 poles with a fanny pack bum bag on each pole with a weapon in it. And if you get it down, you get to use the weapon. And it just became comedy because we put like Skittles in there and we put bra in there, some just weird stuff, and just had fun. We only had one brass knuckles, but the real funny thing was Vince Russo was there at that show.
Oh, okay.
Grado and I had a great time. We're laughing. We're coming back. Vince Russo was like, I had tears in my eyes, bro. It was so good. I loved it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love that. Had you worked with Vince already in WCW? Had you met him much before?
No. I met him when I was in developmental with WWE. I shook his hand, but then I never really made it to the main roster when he was there, and then he was gone by the time I made it up there.
I've got to ask you, so when I was doing research for this conversation, one thing jumped out at me. Am I right in saying that you wrestled a couple of matches as Doink the Clown?
Yeah. I wrestled JBL's Barroom Brawl at the 2002 Vengeance. And then the next Tuesday was the SmackDown taping, I think, or it might have been 2 Monday Night Raws because SmackDown might not have been on yet. I can't remember, but I wrestled Benoit as Doink the Clown.
Wow, that is an obscure match.
Now, I think Doink the Clown should be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a character that's instantly recognizable, instantly over, brings smiles to faces. The people know exactly who he is. And I think there's been 7, maybe 8 guys to put on the face paint and be Doink the Clown. I think they should all be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I was a massive Doink fan as a kid. Absolutely. Doink and Dink all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned it at the start. Pinning Vince McMahon. You're in that match with Vince and Shane. What was that like?
Well, that was where Vince poured the green paint over my head at the beginning of Raw, and I had to sit. That's when Raw was 3 hours. I had to sit there for a good 2 hours before I think they put my head in the toilet. No, they put my head in the toilet first and then poured the green paint. Either way, all the paint dried in my hair because I had to go out at the end of the match, and I didn't get it out for months, and my hair was stained green for like 6 months. But I mean, it wasn't much of a match. They just beat me up, and then DX came out and I rolled him up, but they were going to beat Eugene.
Right.
And it was Shawn Michaels. We were walking through it, goes, well, if you guys are putting his head in the toilet, pouring paint on him, beating him up in the ring, he should win. Vince goes, oh, yeah, you're right. And I was like, I mean, I knew Shawn. I liked Shawn. I'm friendly with him, but he didn't have to say that for me, but that was really cool.
Yeah, and again, it kind of goes back to that character. There's only so much that character should ever take, and the fans just wouldn't want to see that. It makes complete sense, but actually you would, being the ultimate underdog, but you would get your comeuppance and you would get the victory at the end. Otherwise, the whole thing just has a very sour taste about it.
Yeah, Vince didn't need to win, you know. I mean, because then the comedy was then between them and DX and the Spirit Squad, but Eugene needed a little hurrah at the end. So
yeah, absolutely.
I can say I pinned Vince McMahon.
Yeah, exactly. A former WWF champion, no less.
Mm-hmm.
So you said earlier on, you're not on, your retirement tour is probably going to go longer than the Rolling Stones. You're going to keep on going and keep on going. Mm-hmm. When you kind of look back at your wrestling life and your legacy, what do you believe that is, Nick, for you? What are you proudest of from your time in wrestling?
Somebody had tweeted the coach and asked him who was the nicest guy in the locker room, and he said me. He said Eugene was one everybody liked. He was always good mood, fun, and I enjoyed wrestling. I enjoyed traveling. I enjoyed the locker room. I enjoyed all the action figure, the teddy bear, the T-shirts, but just the camaraderie with all the people I was with and going out there and performing all around the world. I mean, it was magical. It was a magical ride.
Absolutely. Well, how can my audience connect with you, support what you're doing, follow you on social media, all that kind of good stuff?
I got my Eugene Behind the Scenes YouTube channel that I'm really working on very hard. I'm on Twitter at the letter U, Gene, Dinsmore, Dinsmore. I'm on Instagram as Nick Dinsmore, but I don't post a whole lot of stuff. But if you're in Canada in the next 12 days, come and see me.
Good stuff. Well, let everyone follow Nick, keep in touch with what he's doing. Come and go out and see him if you can. And do check out his YouTube channel because it's fantastic. And I really like all the questions you're answering and, just all the fan interaction that you're having on there. But what I'm going to say today, Nick, is thank you for joining me. Thank you for such a wonderful wrestling life conversation. As I said, thank you for your portrayal of Eugene and bringing that character out there. On the subject of thanks before we wrap, I always have to say thank you to my great audience for being here. Thank you for Jeff from Tall 8 Productions for bringing this show to life. My very special guest has been the one and only Nick Eugene Dinsmore. I've been Ben Veal. This has been Wrestling Life, and we are done. So until next time, be good to each other. Pay it forward if you can. I'll see you soon. Bye.